These subsidies could make wind and solar account for nearly 60% of U.S. electricity generation by 2050, which might sound fine in unicorn land, but for the people who need reliable energy on a cloudy, windless day, we might actually want to have gas or coal or nuclear. The amendment that I have here fully defunds the Department of Energy's Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. Now, the FY23 omnibus gave this office $3.5 billion. And while the underlying bill and rule cuts funding down to $2 billion, we believe we ought to defund it entirely. Now, that's particularly true coming on the heels of the $1.2 trillion, if you believe the media accounting and reports of the impact of the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, that we believe this is additional spending that the American people do not need. Let the market do what the market's going to do. And if people want to go out and get electronic vehicles, people want to go out and spend their money for something that's good for them, then great. But to have this office continue to be funded to continue to perpetuate this when the office mission is, quote, to equitably transition America to net zero greenhouse gas emissions economy-wide by no later than 2050, which is a fool's errand. And we're undermining our own national security and undermining our own economy in the process, making us beholden to China, undermining our ability to actually have a serious policy in the Middle East, by the way. Right now, we don't even have sanctions in place. We're allowing Iran to make billions of dollars, upwards of 30 to 60 billion, depending on what reports you look at, of dollars they're making on exporting oil to China. We've totally blown it with Saudi, which has created the environment that we're now dealing with in the Middle East, all while this administration, by the way, dumped the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, all of this while pursuing this foolish energy policy, which is undermining our own national security and economy. So now we are going to go ahead and say, sure, let's appropriate another, in this case, $2 billion for the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. We don't need to be doing this. Let the American people go sort this out. And we said, oh, we're going to go subsidize wind and solar. Oh, because it's supposedly, quote, enhanced reliability. Well, tell that to the people of Texas. Texas has more wind than any other state in the country. Yeah, so thumbs up, that's great. Well, say that to all the people who are wondering whether they're going to have power because the grid in Texas is getting dangerously close to not having the ability to sustain. And the only reason we're able to sustain it is because Texas is trying to push and hold up the coal and the gas-fired plants that actually provide reliable energy. And we're subsidizing the unreliable energy at the expense of the reliable energy. And instead of building nuclear power, instead of making sure gas-fired plant is sitting there ready to roll, there is no investment in any of the projects going on into Texas gas-fired plants, American Texas gas that we should, by the way, be exporting around the world, including to Europe. And instead, we're undermining our very grid, our own reliable energy, and we're undermining our ability to compete in the world. I would suggest that this would be money that would be better spent, especially when, I don't know, last time I checked, $2 trillion of deficits. Like, what are we spending our money on? Like, seriously, it's like, how are we actually going to balance our budget and eliminate deficits when we keep spending money on projects like this? And I'd say to my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, how are we going to ever balance the budget when we continue to fund things like this? That's my question. Why don't we pay for this then? Can we at least pay for this out of something? Why don't we pay for this out of the Inflation Reduction Act? Why don't we pay for it by eliminating some of the IRS agents that got expanded? Like, why don't we specifically, and then tell me, go to the American people and say, what would you like to give up to pay for that? That's what I'd like to know. I'd like to know from the American people, what would you give up in order to pay for $2 billion of more of this kind of subsidy? By the way, in the Inflation Reduction Act, 90% of the subsidies go to corporations making over $1 billion. 78% of electric vehicle tax credits are claimed by Americans making over $100,000. Couples making up to $300,000 are still eligible. These subsidies could make wind and solar account for nearly 60% of U.S. electricity generation by 2050, which might sound fine in unicorn land, but for the people who need reliable energy on a cloudy, windless day, we might actually want to have gas or coal or nuclear. And by the way, all of this subsidizes the heck out of China. We're talking about making us not reliant on foreign energy sources. Well, what about China? China is the one producing most of these solar panels, a lot of the battery-powered battery elements. Why are we continuing to do that? I suggest that that is a waste of taxpayer money, it's unpaid for, and we shouldn't continue to perpetuate it And I think that's my time, and I yield back.